I wasn't supposed to hear it. I was sitting at my desk, staring at the open spreadsheets on my laptop when my phone rang. My father's name flashed on the screen. Dad, a word that once carried warmth but had lately become nothing more than an obligation. I answered, "Hey, Dad." Silence. At first, I thought it was a bad connection, but then I heard it, the rustling of fabric, the screech of a chair scraping against the floor, a long, heavy sigh, and then his voice. "She's a failure. She'll never succeed." My stomach twisted into a painful knot. My entire body froze, my phone still pressed against my ear. "Come on, Richard." My mother's voice chimed in, softer but no less sharp. "She's doing fine. She pays the mortgage, doesn't she?" My father scoffed. "That's the least she can do after everything we've done for her." "You think I'm proud of her? She was a mistake, something that should have never happened, a disappointment through and through, and she thinks she's successful? Please, she'll never be anything more than a joke." A mistake. A joke. The words cut through me like 1,000 paper cuts. My mouth went dry, my fingers clenched around my phone. I wanted to hang up. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't move. I couldn't even breathe. "She's lucky we even let her be part of this family," my father continued, his voice thick with disgust. "I don't know why she even tries so hard. She'll never be one of us." And that was when I realized he never meant to call me. He had forgotten to hang up. The call ended abruptly, leaving behind a suffocating silence. My heart pounded so hard, I thought it might shake the walls. I sat there for a long time, staring at nothing, letting the weight of his words crush me. For 6 years, I had been quietly paying their mortgage. They thought their payments were going to the bank, but the truth? I was the one keeping a roof over their heads. Through Vera Capital, the investment company I had created with my financial advisor, I had bought their mortgage from the bank after they nearly lost the house. They never read the fine print. They never knew. And now, I realized, they never would have cared. My entire life, I had bent over backward trying to earn my father's approval. I worked harder than anyone else, climbed higher in my career, made more money than he ever did. But it was never enough. It would never be enough. But this was the moment that changed everything. I exhaled slowly, steadying my hands as I reached for my laptop. I opened the folder containing the mortgage agreements, the payment schedule, the ownership documents. My father thought I was nothing, a failure. But he was about to learn exactly who he had been depending on all these years. And in 1 week, he was going to get the ultimate surprise. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, his words looping in my mind like a broken record. She was a mistake that should have never happened. It wasn't just an insult. It was the certainty in his voice. He said it like a fact, not an opinion, as if my very existence was an inconvenience. I should have been used to it. My father had never been one to offer praise. Even as a kid, I had to fight for his approval. Straight A's, not good enough, promotions, expected. Buying my first home, a waste of money. Everything I did was either dismissed or criticized. But through it all, I held on to one fragile hope. Maybe if I worked hard enough, I could change his mind. That hope shattered the moment I heard that call. By sunrise, I was done feeling hurt. I was done feeling anything. I pulled myself out of bed, made a cup of black coffee, and sat down at my desk. The glow of my laptop screen reflected in my tired eyes as I opened the folder labeled Vera Capital, property number 12, my parents' house. The mortgage they thought they were paying? It was actually mine, and soon they were going to learn the truth in the harshest way possible. Then they're screwed. A slow, satisfied smirk curled on my lips. For 6 years, I had silently carried them. ensuring they had a roof over their heads, food on their table, and the illusion of stability. Not because they deserved it, but because, despite everything, I had still hoped for basic decency, a shred of acknowledgement, a moment where they would look at me, not as an obligation or an inconvenience, but as someone who mattered. But I had been a fool. I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of reality settle in. My father, the man who had spent his life making me feel like I was never enough, had been living under my generosity all these years. He thought I was a failure, a mistake. Yet, he had unknowingly depended on me for everything. And now, the power had shifted. My phone buzzed, pulling me from my thoughts. A message from my mother. Mom, "Hey, sweetheart, can you come over for dinner this Sunday? We'd love to see you." I stared at the words, my lips pressing into a thin line. The last time she had invited me over, it hadn't been for family bonding. It had been for money, and I had no doubt this was the same. I considered ignoring it, deleting it, but something inside me told me to play along. If my father could pretend to care about me, I could pretend right back. Me, of course, looking forward to it, a lie, but a necessary one. Before shutting my laptop, I had one more thing to check. My uncle, my father's older brother, was the only family member who had ever treated me like I was worth something. If there was anyone who would give me the truth, it was him. Me. "Hey, Uncle James, I need to ask you something. Have you ever heard Dad say anything about me? Anything unusual?" His response came almost instantly. "Uncle James, Emma, we need to talk. I didn't want to be the one to tell you this, but it's worse than you think." A tight knot formed in my chest. Worse? My phone rang. I answered on the first ring. "Uncle James?" He sighed. "Emma, I've kept quiet for too long, but after what I heard last week, I can't anymore." I braced myself. "What did they say?" There was a long pause, as if he were trying to find the right words. Then he spoke. "They don't just talk about you behind your back. They've been planning something." A chill ran through me. "Planning what?" "Your father. He's been looking into your finances. He's convinced you've been hiding money from them. He told your mother last week that if you don't willingly start handing over more cash, they'll find a way to force your hand." A slow, burning rage ignited in my chest. Force my hand? How? He mentioned calling your employer, trying to discredit you, maybe even contacting the IRS to audit you. Anything that could put you in a vulnerable position. I gripped my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. They weren't just ungrateful. They weren't just cruel. They were willing to destroy me for money. I took a slow breath, steadying my voice. "Uncle James, I need you to do something for me. Anything, sweetheart. I need proof. Because if they were going to play dirty, I wasn't just going to fight back. I was going to end this." The next 2 days were spent preparing. If my father wanted a war, I would show him just how dangerous it was to underestimate me. The first call I made was to David Harper, my financial advisor. "Emma?" he greeted, his voice warm as always. "I take it this isn't just a social call?" "Not exactly," I said, tapping my pen against the desk. "I need to know exactly how airtight our agreement is on property number 12. If they miss a payment, how fast can I act?" David Harper didn't even hesitate. Immediately, the purchase option clause allows Vera Capital to assume full ownership the second they default. They have no legal recourse unless they have $360,000 lying around to buy you out. I let out a humorless chuckle. They don't. Then they're screwed. The word sent a thrill through me. Not because I wanted revenge. No, this wasn't about vengeance anymore. This was about justice. about finally taking back my life from the people who had spent years tearing me down. I checked my calendar. Their next payment was due in 5 days. 5 days until my father, the man who had called me a mistake, realized that the very home he lived in was never truly his. 5 days until they would have to beg me for help. And this time, I wouldn't give it. On Sunday, I drove to my parents' house, masking my emotions behind a neutral facade. The sight of the home I owned, no longer brought comfort. It felt foreign, enemy territory. The moment I stepped inside, my mother greeted me with over-the-top enthusiasm. "Emma, sweetheart, come in." Her smile was fake. I knew it now. Everything had always been fake. The dinner was nothing more than a poorly disguised setup. My father sat at the head of the table, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. My mother fluttered around, placing dishes on the table with excessive care, as if the perfect meal would soften the real reason I was here. And then came the request. "We need your help." I took a slow sip of water, feigning ignorance. "Help? With what?" "The mortgage payment," my mother said, hesitating. "It's a little tight this month." I nearly laughed. A little tight? They were about to default, and they were still downplaying it. "How much do you need?" I asked, knowing full well the answer wouldn't matter. My mother exchanged a glance with my father. "We were thinking an extra $3,500 a month should keep us stable." My grip tightened around my fork. They had no idea I was already covering $6,000 every single month. And now they wanted me to hand them more? I set my fork down, tilting my head. "That's a lot of money." My father's mask cracked for the first time, irritation flashing across his face. "It's nothing compared to what we've done for you." And that was it. That was the moment I knew. They would never change. I leaned back, a slow smile forming. "Oh, don't worry," I said smoothly. "You're about to get all the help you deserve. Because in 3 days, they wouldn't just be struggling to make a payment, they would be tenants in the home they once called their own. And when they failed to pay rent, I would be the one handing them the eviction notice. They had no idea." For 3 days, silence stretched between us like a taut wire, ready to snap. No calls, no messages, no last-minute attempts at guilt-tripping. They still believed they were in control, that their mortgage payment had gone through, that the bank was still the owner of their home. They were so sure. And in less than 24 hours, that illusion would shatter. I sat at my desk, staring at my phone, waiting. I didn't have to wait long. At exactly 9:07 a.m. on Friday morning, the notification arrived in my inbox. Subject: Urgent Default Notice, Property Number 12. From Vera Capital Legal Department. I clicked it open, my heartbeat steady, measured. "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Sinclair, due to failure to submit the agreed-upon mortgage payment by the deadline of the 15th, the purchase option clause has been exercised. Effective immediately, Vera Capital is the sole owner of the property located at address redacted. As per contractual agreements, the current occupants will be considered month-to-month tenants subject to rental terms. Failure to adhere to rental agreements may result in eviction proceedings." I exhaled, a slow breath of finality. It was done. For the first time in my life, I was holding the strings. The house, the home they had so proudly flaunted, the home my father had belittled me from, the home they never once thanked me for saving, was mine. Not that it hadn't been mine before. The difference was now, they knew it. At 9:42 a.m., my phone rang. Mom, I let it go to voicemail. At 9:47 a.m., she called again. At 9:50 a.m., my father tried. I let them sweat. Let them panic. Let them feel powerless for the first time in their lives. I finally answered at 10:15 a.m., my voice calm, measured. Emma! My mother's voice was high-pitched, frantic. There's been some sort of mistake with the bank. We just got a notice saying we've defaulted on the mortgage, but that can't be right. You have to help us. I leaned back in my chair, a slow smile forming. It wasn't a mistake. I repeated, enunciating every word. It's not a mistake. Silence. What are you talking about, sweetheart? My mother let out a nervous chuckle, still grasping at denial. This is our house. I tilted my head, letting the weight of my words settle over them. No, Mom, I said, my voice razor sharp. It was your house. But the second you defaulted, Vera Capital took full ownership. Legally, you're now my tenants. I heard her breath hitch. My father cursed under his breath. Then Ethan, my golden boy of a brother who had been quiet up until now, laughed. You mean to tell me we've been paying rent to our own failure of a sister this whole time? He scoffed, voice dripping with disdain. Well, I guess that explains why the bank's a mess. You probably screwed up the paperwork just like you screw up everything else. I clenched my jaw, forced myself to stay calm. If he thought I was still the same girl who would take his insults in silence, he was sorely mistaken. I took a breath. Steady, cold, in control. Well, since you seem to think I screw everything up, I said smoothly, you're going to love this part. Rent is due in 30 days. If you don't pay, you're getting evicted. A stunned pause. Then, Emma, wait, my mother started, desperation seeping into her voice. But my father cut her off. This is a bluff, he snapped, his usual authoritative tone cracking with panic. You wouldn't do this to your own family. I let out a short, humorless laugh. Wouldn't I? I thought about the years I had spent covering for them, the thousands upon thousands of dollars I had funneled into their comfortable existence, the mockery, the insults, the betrayal. I thought about my father's voice on that phone call. She's a mistake that should have never happened. I thought about how they had planned to blackmail me, ruin my career, steal from me if I didn't willingly hand over more money. My father had always believed I was weak. He was about to find out just how wrong he was. I've already spoken to my lawyer, I said, my voice deadly calm. If you don't pay, you're out. And if you try anything, any manipulation, any threats, any accidental damage to the house, I'll press charges. You ungrateful little... I hung up before my father could finish the sentence. Within minutes, my phone exploded with messages. Mom, Emma, please don't do this. We're family. Let's talk. Dad, you'll regret this. David Harper. My words. Ethan, you think you're so smart? You're just a bitter, pathetic loser. We'll find a way to take the house back. Watch. I read each one. Then I blocked their numbers. For the first time in my life, I wasn't bending over backward for them. I wasn't giving them another chance. I was done. I leaned back in my chair, staring out the window, letting the weight of everything settle over me. For years, I had been holding them up. Now, they would finally have to stand on their own. And if they fell, that was their problem, not mine. We'll find a way to take the house back. Watch Ethan's words glared at me from the screen, a final desperate attempt at control. I didn't reply. Instead, I sat back, exhaled, and pressed block. For years, they had dictated the rules. They had wielded power over me with guilt, manipulation, and dismissal. But now, I was in control. They could send all the threats they wanted. It wouldn't change a thing. The calm before the storm. The days that followed were eerily quiet. No more calls, no more texts. I knew why. They weren't accepting their fate. They were planning. It was only a matter of time before they made their next move. It came 3 days later on a Wednesday morning. I was at work when my phone lit up with a call from an unknown number. I ignored it. A minute later, another call, then another, then an email. Subject: urgent home foreclosure mistake from law offices of Will Ethan Monroe. I clicked it open, already knowing what I'd find. Dear Miss Sinclair, we have been contacted by your parents, Richard and Margaret Sinclair, regarding the recent foreclosure of their home. They believe there has been a misunderstanding and would like to discuss the possibility of reinstating ownership. Please contact us at your earliest convenience to avoid further legal complications. Sincerely, I let out a slow, humorless chuckle. Of course they got a lawyer. I forwarded the email to David Harper, my financial advisor. Less than 10 minutes later, he called me back, laughing. They don't have a case, he said, amusement lacing his voice. They signed the mortgage contract. They signed the purchase option clause. They signed everything. They can't fight this in court because legally, you're in the right. I exhaled, relieved but unsurprised. I figured, but they won't stop, will they? David Harper chuckled. Probably not, but there's nothing they can do. I thought about my father, his pride, his arrogance. He would rather burn everything to the ground than admit defeat. Number they wouldn't stop. Not until they had exhausted every possible way to manipulate their way back in. And sure enough, that night, it happened. The final desperate attempt. A hard, urgent knock echoed through my apartment. I knew before I even opened the door. I swung it open, and there they were, my parents. My father stood stiff, his face red with anger. My mother's eyes were swollen, her hands wringing together in desperation. Emma, please, she whispered. Please, we don't know where else to go. I folded my arms. What do you want? My father stepped forward, his voice tight with barely contained rage. We need the house back. I arched a brow. You needed to pay your mortgage. You didn't. Now it's not yours. You have no right to do this to us. His voice was low, threatening. I tilted my head. I have every right, legally, financially, morally. My mother's face crumpled. We raised you, we gave you everything, and you're punishing us for what? I laughed, short and cold. For calling me a failure? For saying I was a mistake? For plotting to ruin me the moment I stopped handing over money? She flinched. My father clenched his jaw. You're being cruel, he hissed. I met his gaze, unwavering. No, Dad, I'm being fair. A thick silence settled between us. Then my father's lips curled into a sneer. You'll regret this, Emma, he spat. You think you're winning, but you're not. You'll never be anything without us. And one day you'll realize that. Something inside me clicked into place. The last sliver of hope that he could ever change? Gone. I met his gaze head on. Then I guess we'll see, won't we? And without another word, I shut the door in their faces. For the first time in my life, I felt completely free. The aftermath. The moment I closed that door, I knew I was done. Not just with their manipulation, not just with their entitlement, with them. I stood there for a long moment, my hands gripping the doorknob, my heart pounding. For years, I had tried to earn my father's respect. Years I had bent over backward, hoping he would finally see me as someone worth being proud of. But as his threat still rang in my ears, I realized something. No matter what I did, it would never be enough for them. And the best part, I didn't need it to be. The next morning, I sent the final notice. Subject: Notice to vacate, property number 12. From Vera Capital Legal Department. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Sinclair, as previously notified, the mortgage agreement for the property located at address redacted is no longer in effect due to non-payment. As of today, your tenancy is officially terminated. You are required to vacate the premises within 30 days. Failure to comply will result in formal eviction proceedings. Please ensure all personal belongings are removed before the deadline to avoid legal complications. Sincerely, Emma Sinclair owner, Vera Capital. I stared at the email for a long moment. Then I hit send. This was it. They were out of my life. It didn't take long for the fallout to begin. My mother called me 27 times that day. I didn't answer. My father left a single voicemail. You'll regret this. One day you'll come crawling back. And when you do, we won't be here. I listened to it twice. Then I deleted it. Ethan, ever the sore loser, tried one last desperate move. Ethan, congrats, Emma. You just ruined our family. Hope you're happy. I didn't reply because for the first time in my life, I was finally free. That night it happened, a knock at my door. Hard, urgent, unrelenting. I already knew who it was. I stood in my kitchen, gripping my coffee mug, staring at the door as the knocking continued. I could picture them. My father, his jaw clenched in fury. My mother, eyes swollen from forced tears. Ethan, probably smirking, thinking he had the upper hand. They had tried the legal route, failed. They had tried to ruin my career, failed. Now they were here, begging, demanding, threatening. I let them knock a little longer, let them stew in their desperation. Then, finally, I set my mug down and opened the door. And there they were, the people who had spent their entire lives making me feel small. My father's face was red with barely contained rage. My mother's hands were clasped together, trembling, though whether it was genuine or a performance, I couldn't tell. Ethan stood off to the side, arms crossed, his smirk faltering just enough to tell me he wasn't as confident as he wanted to seem. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. What do you want? I asked, my voice calm. My mother stepped forward first, her voice thick with manufactured emotion. Emma, please, she whispered. We don't know where else to go. I stared at her, the same woman who, just a week ago, had been laughing with my father about how I was nothing more than a joke. The same woman who, for years, had stood by silently while he dismissed me, insulted me, treated me like an afterthought. I tilted my head. Sounds like a you problem. Her lips parted in shock as if she had genuinely expected me to cave. My father stepped in next, his voice low, hard. We need the house back. I laughed, short, sharp, and cold. That's unfortunate, because you're not getting it. His jaw tightened. You have no right to do this to us. I arched a brow. Oh, I have every right, legally, financially, morally. My mother let out a shaky breath. We raised you, Emma. We gave you everything, and you're just throwing us out? I let out a slow, amused breath. Raised me? I repeated, my voice quiet, dangerous. You mean the years of being ignored? The constant reminders that Ethan was the golden child while I was just there? Or do you mean when you stood by while Dad told me I was a failure? A mistake? She flinched. Good. I shifted my gaze to my father. And let's not forget you, Dad. My voice was steady, controlled. You lived under my generosity for years. You sent me checks thinking they were going to a bank, when all this time, you were paying me. And yet, behind my back, you still called me worthless. His lips pressed into a thin line. You think this makes you powerful? He spat. You think this makes you better than us? I tilted my head. I don't think, I said. I know. Ethan, who had been unusually silent, finally spoke. You're pathetic, he scoffed. You really think kicking us out is going to make you happy? I turned my gaze on him, my lips curling into a smirk. Oh, Ethan, I said, voice laced with amusement. "I think it's going to be the most satisfying thing I've ever done." His smirk faltered, and that's when I knew. I had won. I stepped back, placing one hand on the door. "You have 3 weeks to find somewhere else to live. I suggest you start now." "Emma, wait!" I slammed the door shut. For a long moment, I stood there, hands still on the doorknob, heart pounding in my chest. Then, finally, I exhaled. For years, they had controlled me, manipulated me, used me. Now, they were nothing. The final notice. The next morning, I sent the last email. Subject: Final notice to vacate property number 12. From Vera Capital Legal Department. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Sinclair, this is your official final notice. You are required to vacate the premises within 21 days. Failure to comply will result in formal eviction proceedings and legal action. Any attempts to vandalize, damage, or tamper with the property will be met with criminal charges. Sincerely, Emma Sinclair, owner, Vera Capital. I stared at the email for a moment, then I hit send, and just like that, it was done. The fallout. The days that followed were a blur of messages, desperate calls, veiled threats. I ignored them all. Ethan tried to call, leaving a single voicemail. "You're gonna regret this. We're family, Jess. You don't just walk away from family." I deleted it. My mother sent emails, long, rambling messages about how she just wanted to talk, how she was so sorry for everything. I marked them as spam. Then, finally, the last message came. A simple text from my father. "Dad, you'll regret this one day. You'll be alone and you'll come crawling back. And when you do, we won't be there." I read it. Then I blocked his number too. I had spent my whole life chasing after their approval. And now, I didn't need it. A new beginning. 21 days later, I got a call from David Harper. "They're gone," he said simply. And just like that, the house was mine. No more manipulation, no more control. I drove there one last time, stepping through the empty rooms, the echoes of my childhood ringing in the silence. But I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. 2 weeks later, I sold the house. The money? I used it to start a fund for young women escaping financially abusive families, because I knew what it was like to be trapped, to believe that love had to be earned. But now I knew better. Real family isn't determined by blood. It's determined by the people who truly stand by you. And my real family was me. A few months later, a message popped up in my inbox. "Mom, Emma? Please, I don't know where else to go. Can we talk?" I stared at it for a long moment. A few months ago, I might have agonized over it. I might have questioned myself. But now? I simply deleted the message. Some bridges deserve to be burned, and I wasn't looking back, to believe that love had to be earned. But I had learned the truth. Love that comes with conditions isn't love at all. It took me years to unlearn that lesson, to realize that no matter how much I gave, no matter how hard I worked, my family would never see me as anything more than a convenient source of income, an ATM with a heartbeat. But now, I was done. The aftermath. 30 days passed. I didn't check in, I didn't drive by, I didn't ask if they needed help, because I already knew the answer. They had spent their entire lives expecting me to clean up their messes, expecting me to bend, to break, to sacrifice myself so they could live comfortably. But this time, when the weight of their own irresponsibility came crashing down, I wasn't there to hold them up. David Harper handled everything. He confirmed they had moved out the day before the deadline, probably trying to save themselves the embarrassment of being formally evicted. When I finally did visit the house, I wasn't surprised by what I found. The furniture was gone. The kitchen was stripped bare. They had taken whatever they could. And the rest? They had left behind in piles of garbage. Typical. I walked through the empty halls, the echoes of my childhood ringing in the silence. The doorway where I had once sat with a book in my hands, waiting for my father to come home and acknowledge me. The living room where I had overheard my parents dismiss my accomplishments, where Ethan had taunted me with their approval, knowing I would never have it. The kitchen where my mother had once told me, in a hushed voice, that family comes first, right before asking me for another loan. Now, all of it was just a house, a hollow, abandoned shell. And for the first time in my life, I felt nothing. No sadness, no guilt, no nostalgia, just relief. The final goodbye. I pulled out my phone and dialed the one person who had always been honest with me. Uncle James. "They're gone," I said simply. He exhaled on the other end of the line. "How do you feel?" I thought about it, about the years of striving, the years of hoping, the years of waiting for love that would never come. Then, finally, I smiled. "Lighter," I admitted. Uncle James chuckled. "Good, you deserve to be." I ended the call, took one last look at the house, my house, and turned away. 2 weeks later, I sold it. The market was strong. The offers came quickly. And within days, it was no longer my burden to carry. The money, I used it to start a fund for young women escaping financially abusive families. Because I knew what it was like to be trapped, to believe that you owed your family everything, to be made to feel guilty for wanting to stand on your own. But now, I had something stronger than guilt. Freedom, the final message. 3 months passed. I was sitting in my new apartment, my own space, free from the ghosts of my past, when a message popped up in my inbox. "Mom, Emma, please, I don't know where else to go. Can we talk?" I stared at it for a long time. A few months ago, I would have agonized over this. I would have questioned myself. Maybe I was being too harsh. Maybe I was being cruel. Maybe, just maybe, if I gave them one last chance, things could be different. But not anymore. I knew better now. Some people don't change. Some wounds don't heal. Some bridges deserve to be burned. And some doors deserve to stay closed. Without hesitation, I hovered over the message. And then I deleted it. I wasn't looking back. Not ever again. In life, we often find ourselves seeking validation from those who should love us unconditionally, family. But what happens when that love is transactional? When your worth is measured only by what you provide? The story of Emma Sinclair teaches us an invaluable lesson. Self-respect must come before obligation. For years, she bent over backward to earn the approval of a father who would never see her as enough. She gave, she sacrificed, and yet she was still deemed a failure in their eyes. It wasn't until she reclaimed her power, emotionally, financially, and legally, that she truly found freedom. For many middle-aged Americans, this story resonates deeply. It reminds us that family is not defined by blood, but by the people who truly stand by us. We are not bound to those who manipulate, belittle, or use us. It takes courage to walk away, but sometimes the greatest act of love for yourself is closing the door on those who only open theirs when they need something. If there's one takeaway from Emma's journey, it's this: you don't owe anyone your peace. And once you let go of toxic ties, you make room for a life that truly belongs to you.